got the screenshot of about 4 of the data breaches, the major ones, which happened in the last. It's mainly in July is what they're talking about. So if you see, there are 8.4 billion records. You see these number of records which are like in millions, and these are all the identities which we are talking about. So the domain which we are talking about today is basically how you can secure these identities. Okay, so any hacker who is trying to hack an enterprise or hack a company, so basically what they would do is they'll try to get the customer data which is stored within the company, right? So it is utmost important to secure what identities you have within the enterprise. So that's where the identity and access management domain comes into picture. So the cost of breach, you definitely you will see here, like if you see 8.5 8.4 billion records are like from a in Q1 to 2020. So you can see how much customer data is gone to hackers hands. So it is very critical for any enterprise to secure their identities, the user records, their access, and whatnot, all the permissions, privileges of users. So the identity and access management domain is nothing but we ensure that, like all the policies are set, the strong policies are set to protect identities, and you have the access is granted only for the people who are who require the access and things like that. So I'll get into each one of those different components of identity and access management in detail. But you just see the the seriousness of the breach of identities when it comes to securing an enterprise. Um, yeah. So the next slide. So here I'm trying to show, in today's world, like the highly connected world. So any enterprise, which is doing a global business, so they will have thousands of applications, and a number of there could be maybe 100 applications internal, but there could be 400 applications in the cloud. So the boundary of an enterprise, it is getting thinner and thinner, right? So the employees of a company, they may have to access the internal applications, like for example their HR, payroll, or their SAP, and also they may want to access their sales the CRM application. It could be in the cloud, like for example Salesforce. So the boundary of any enterprise as of today, it is actually very thin. Like you can't have very strong firewall policies, because you may have to allow your employees to access the external applications as well. So this is one of the the data which is collected in this year. So if you see here, I just wanted to highlight one thing here, where you see the third one, the 40%. There is a pillar here. This basically says accidental data breaches caused by employees. So employees generally, they are trusted identities within a company, right? So the company would give them access to certain applications. For example, the people who are in payroll, or account receivables or account payables, like in the finance. So they will have the access to the finance data, or they could do wire transfer. So so there is a the 40% of the security risk for any enterprise. This basically says that it is the data breach is caused because of the employees, because employees are not really protecting their data. They may be saving the data in a password in a file, or maybe they would be giving the password via to their friend, to their colleague. So somehow there are different ways to they compromise the credentials. Okay, so if you see here, most of the security risk, like 40% of the incidents are happening because of the data breach. And again, there is another one, 31%, which is again saying that there is a malicious internal breach. This is nothing but, like the users who have access to the applications within the company. So they they actually misuse their access. So that is again again another security threat. Maybe they are not required to have the access, but they are continue to have access, though their role is changed within a company. Their role, the privileges comes with the role is not changed, so they will continue to have access to the critical assets. And they may have malicious intentions, where they could hack, or they could maybe provide a security threat to the company. So by all this, you can see that, like the securing identity is very, very critical for, you know, any enterprise in today's world. Okay, this again some more statistics I just wanted to show. Though, like, you know, you may see that, okay, you know, the LinkedIn, you know, for example, you know, some time ago they said about 2 million records are, you know, stolen. So immediately, as a, or Gmail, for example, like, you know, Google may say that, okay, you know, our some of our identities are stolen, like, you know, they are in millions. So immediately you may think that, okay, you know, I do not have anything sensitive in my Gmail, so I'm okay. But it is not so. If you see here, like, there is a 31%, there is a statistics here. So this basically says that 31% of data breach victims experience identity theft at a later time. So immediately you may not realize that, okay, how your data is going to be useful for the for the hacker, or, you know, you may not know, because you may think that, okay, my Gmail, or, you know, my social, maybe Facebook or LinkedIn, it may not be that important. But what happens generally is, like, immediately, you know, you may not see the consequence of, you know, the data breach. So slowly what hackers would do is they start, you know, accumulating data from different sources, for example your Gmail or LinkedIn or, you know, Facebook and all that, then try to correlate certain things, and that may cause, you know, security incident for you later. Okay, so that's also very, very important. So, you know, you see here 31% of the data breach victims have some or other time they will experience the whatever the consequence of the data breach. And 74%, these are also very, very critical here. 74% of IT security professionals say their enterprise suffered a breach due to compromised privileged account. Privileged accounts are nothing but the root accounts, like, you know, for example, in Linux or, you know, in Windows, you may have a super user account or, you know, root accounts. So 74% of the security professionals are saying that, you know, these privileged accounts are being compromised. Okay, so this is also again one more. So it depends on the actual loss to the enterprise. It actually depends on what kind of privilege, you know, the account had. Okay. So over 1 billion records were compromised due to data breaches in 2019. So, you know, and again, this is again, like, you know, 70% of enterprises will incorporate SaaS in their infrastructure. So it means that there are more and more data of an enterprise going out of their network. They're going to use the applications which are in the cloud, like, you know, outside their enterprise. So since, you know, they have to secure their enterprise, also they have to keep up to date with the technology, right? So what happens is, like, you know, so you can't really, you know, consider security as the main thing, and, you know, don't grow your business. So to grow your business, you may have to get into some of the SaaS applications, and, you know, you may have to move some of your data to the cloud. Okay, even though it is private cloud, or, you know, you may have some security systems included in the cloud, but still, you know, once the data goes to cloud, there are more ways for hackers to hack that identity data. Okay, so you see there, like, you know, the more and more in the coming days, coming years, the identity and access management is going to be the one of the core element for, you know, securing any enterprise. Okay, so these again one more statistics, I just wanted to show. So mainly the CIOs, when there was a interview, there was a survey by the Gartner. So they had surveyed all the CIOs and asked them, what is where you are going to invest, most for, in the next 5 years. So what they're saying is 43% they are going to invest on the identity and access management, like securing the identity and securing the access. So that is where they are going to invest. And there is the endpoint security, which, as always, like, since now most of the applications and data can be accessed through mobile, because, companies want their employees to, work when they're remote. So, you can see that about 70% of the investment, 75%, more than 75% of the investment is going to identity and access management and endpoint security. So this is very, very critical for all of us to, to get to know what is there in identity and management, what are the new technologies in identity and access management, how you can, secure an enterprise, by investing on identity and access management technologies. Okay. So now just coming to, again, still we are in introduction. So coming to the definition of identity and access management, so you could consider it as identity management separate and access management separate as well, because these are two different things who are actually, like one is identity and one is access to that identity. So there are different products, to manage identities and manage access, and there are some products which are going to provide both as well. But basically, IDAM is nothing but it is a framework of policies and technologies for ensuring that the proper people in an enterprise have the appropriate access to technology resources. So this says that like at any given point in time, any user within a company, he should have enough access to perform his duties. Okay, so he should not have less access, then he may not be able to be productive, or he may not be efficient in his job, or he should not have more access where he may try to compromise the security of the company. Okay, so the identities can be, it could be, it is a digital identity basically. It could be internal users or external users. So internal users are nothing but the employees of the company. Again, you have the contractors and employees, and you also have partners, and you have a lot of even channel partners, suppliers. So all those are entities for an enterprise. Okay, and also you have devices, like for example, like some of the applications could be accessed through your mobile, so they could register your mobile in their network. So again, that will be considered as an identity. And it could be a network equipment. For example, if you have a router or a smart device within a smart equipment within your company, like routers or any of those. So again, because they can be accessed directly by connecting to the IP address, so that is again an identity in the identity system. And there are servers, and there will be applications as well, because some of the applications may connect to may interact with each other as well, right? So they are like, again, we can consider them as an identities. And access, nothing but like you would have heard authentication, authorization, federation. So basically these are the ways, like how a user accesses the system. So when they're accessing, they have to authenticate. Once they authenticate, the system would say what they are authorized to use. And also if I'm from one company and trying to access my partner company application, then there is nothing but a federation, like the two companies network will trust each other, and they would provide, they will allow the access. So that's why it is called authentication, authorization, and federation. These are the main topics there. And then you have compliance. Since you have a lot of personal information while creating onboarding an employee, onboarding a supplier or partner, you collect a lot of information and start storing them internally. So there are a lot of regulations like SOX compliance, HIPAA compliance, and PCI compliance. If I have credit card data, then it is called as PCI compliance. And every even European Union, they have their compliance. US, they have compliance. Even India, there are compliance, ISO standards and all that. So yeah, so there are a lot of data privacy compliance and regulatory standards which these identity and access management systems should adhere to. Okay, so basically this will be in the form of reporting and giving the dashboards and all that, like how, what is the health of identity and access within an enterprise. So yeah, this, don't worry, there are a lot of things in this picture, but I'm trying to show where identity and access management comes in security landscape. Like for example, you see a lot of areas in security, right? So this is a cyber security landscape where you see that there is a software level, hardware level, and there is a human level, right? So the software level, where you have all these the vulnerability assessment and intrusion detection and data security, cloud security, all that will come under the software level. For example, like you would install a software and try to define some of the policies and try to protect your environment. And there, even in software, you could see there are like there are some preventive softwares which are like going to correlate certain incidents and try to say that, okay, trying to predict there could be a security issue, and so that appropriate action can be taken. Because there are you see there is a security prevention and response, and there is a detection. So this all comes under the software level. And the hardware level, you can see that there are like the OT security, IT security. There are a lot of products which are coming in the hardware level as well. Like when you store data, you allow them to encrypt the data within the hardware level itself, right? So that all comes under the data security in this. Okay, So if you see the left hand side, this encompasses the entire landscape, like you are the human vulnerability. So in that, the first one is identity and access management, where you have to give access to users to perform their duties. Since these are all like human identities, so there is always a chance of them making mistakes intentionally or unintentionally, right? And then you have digital rights management. So we are not going to touch upon those. But these are all again coming under the human element, like cyber awareness training, like educating your employees and what to do, what not to do in terms of security, what can be shared, what cannot be shared, and getting them sign the non-disclosure agreements and employment agreements. All that comes under this. So we are going to just touch upon this identity and access management piece. Okay. So I'll just check, is there any comments in this? I don't know where I should check the comments. I think there are no comments. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to the next slide. So this is a reference architecture. I know I'm showing you some of the complex architecture diagrams here, but just I will explain from beginning, like how you need to look at it. So you see, like in the left hand side, you have the automated data feed. For example, like you have HR, you have files. So this is, for example, okay, just set the ground here. So this is basically an enterprise. Okay, so for an enterprise, you have the data which will be coming in the form of files, and it could be maybe some other web service which are connecting through web service layer, and there are data which are directly coming to the enterprise. Okay, and there are people, like there will be workforce, like for example employees, contractors, and then you have partners and customers. Even those are all going to come into the enterprise, right? Okay, these are the different identities which are coming into the enterprise. And then you have device as well. There will be connected workstations, like people are working remotely and connecting to the within the network, like through VPN or through any other means. And there are mobile, where there will be applications installed on the mobile which will allow them to access the emails and company, their enterprise applications. Okay, so you understand this left side, right? So these are the different ways anybody can the legitimate users can access the applications and data within the enterprise. Okay, so the different actions what they would perform here is they could create an entity, create a user inside, or they could create a device, or they could do anything like creation can be done, or they could update some of the records, or they could delete, like when employee terminates, then you delete their access, and there could be transfer happening for you of their employees, or the workforce, or there will be access requests coming in, like the external the applications. When someone try to access something, there will be access requests coming into the enterprise. And there will be attestations are nothing but this is periodically done to ensure that people do not have more access than required. So every quarter, like the companies companies do the attestation process. Like they will extract all the privileges from every application, permission from the application, and ask the managers of all the employees to attest whether the employees need to have the rights, continue to have rights, or whether to terminate whether to remove their rights. So that is nothing but attestation. So I will go into that later. And then unlocking account. So you definitely understand this unlock part. So when it comes here, so this is where the identity and access management services are there. So you see, first is like first pillar, like set of services are coming under governance. This is nothing but where you define password policies, and you define access policies, and you define the roles, and you define how the attestation should be done, because some of the companies may do it quarterly, maybe some banks and all, they have to do it maybe quarterly, and some maybe manufacturing companies do it, and it depends on which are the regulatory standards they have to conform to. Okay, so identity governance is nothing but how all the audit and reporting comes here, and regulatory compliance and all that comes in this. And you have identity management, where you manage the life cycle of an identity. As I mentioned earlier, identities could be users or devices or anything, actually any identity which requires access of applications within the enterprise. So you manage the entire life cycle of that. We will see what life cycles are. And then access provisioning. Provisioning is nothing but granting access to an identity to an application. Okay, so that there is a different process, to do that. And then there is a centralized role management. So the roles, the best practice to have with the permissions are granted through roles. So if you grant them individually, it's very difficult to manage and very difficult to track. So what companies do is they will centralize the roles. Like for example, there is a HR manager role or finance manager or software engineer or IT developer, whatever role it is. Then they will assign the permissions to set of applications. So when someone gets onboarded to a company, so they will just assign that role. So by default, they will get access to their default applications. Okay, so that's why it is called, there is a centralized role management. And there will be workflows as well, because somebody is accessing requesting for access or requesting for a creation of the promotion. There will be access, request for promotions or request for onboarding a new employee. So they all will go through workflows. So the workflows are nothing but initially, there will be the managers will have to approve it, and department head, and then the request will go to the administrator to create a account in the respective application, and it is going that way. So we are going to touch upon each of these blocks what I'm showing here. So I will explain in detail when we get in there. And then you have the access management layer, where you have the all the single sign on, and the federation sign on, the web access management, and role based access control. All that will be implemented through access management layer. And then there is a authentication layer, where the single authentic, like password, the username password authentication, or multi-factor authentication, for example, two-factor authentication, OTP authentication, even adaptive authentication these days, because based on the risk profile of a user, you change the access, you change the authentication requirement, to access the resource. So these are all different authentication services. Even these ones we will get to each one of these modules. Okay, and there will be applications which could be on premise. There will be within the enterprise. I can have applications. I can have a SaaS application. These are all like software as service. Like for example, if you have the Salesforce and all that, they are all SaaS applications. Public cloud is nothing but the companies have their own cloud, their own cloud, but it is a private cloud. It means that there is a separate network for them within the cloud. Like for example, if I buy private cloud from Amazon or Microsoft Azure, then I create my own virtual private network, and it will be connected to all my within the enterprise. So it is nothing but instead of having all the hardware within our enterprise, so the hardware will be from in the cloud. So that is called as private cloud. And there is a public cloud, where the the things like Gmail and all that which you use, like Gmail or Facebook, where there will be one application like Gmail, Google, which is handling that, and they actually have a multi-tenant model within their one server. There will be one mail server where all the identities will be stored. Okay, so that is a public cloud. So as you see here, the public cloud, the security is very low, because and also they don't really keep very confidential information, like personally identifiable information. And in private cloud, it is as good as on premise, but still, like, you have to go through the network, to connect to the cloud. So that is little not that secure. And you have SaaS. This is again like this is like next to private cloud actually. Again, you should not be keeping all very confidential and PII information in SaaS. Okay, so I hope I'll just check, is there any, are there any questions? Just Surendra, is there any, how can I access the chart here? Any, I cannot see that in
The chat window, you can see it, Lakshman.
okay,
Like
just
next to participants, there is a chat now.
in mine, since I'm presenting, so I have one, I'm just checking. Okay.
On the top right side, it will be there. The
Okay,
menu.
okay.
Right.
Okay, I think there are some questions. I'll just to check that quickly. Anyone asked? Okay, sorry. I think I did not see this. Okay.
Almost all are technical related only.
Okay, okay. I think what is SaaS application, right? It is
Yeah.
software as service. For example, if you know Salesforce or if you have used Tally, for example, like Tally again, it can be a SaaS or QuickBooks. Like if you know QuickBooks, that's again accounting software in cloud. And I think mainly like all of us know Salesforce, right? And the Zoho, like it is an Indian company which provides SaaS-based applications. Like for example, they provide more than 40 applications in cloud. So that is nothing but like you don't have to install this application within the enterprise, within your company. So they have a single instance which is running there in the cloud, and you access that application. Okay, so they will actually give you some kind of privacy, because they what they would do is your data won't be stored in the same database. It then be, though it is could be a same database, but it will be a multi-tenant architecture is what they call it. So every tenant is nothing but every company will have a separate database storage. Okay, that is called SaaS. Though it will be, again there is a security risk, since all these multi-tenants will be stored in the same server, right? So but still they would have, they would provide some form of privacy and some form of security, so that the data from each other, you don't happen to access different message, different data, of different enterprise. But definitely there is a security risk in that SaaS application. But nowadays these are all getting matured, and the multi-tenant architecture is like now there are not too many issues in that. um, Okay, I think are you sharing the PPT? I think I will share this with Arvind. You can share it with them. Um, okay, so no audio is coming here. So was it breaking actually in between? I don't know whether all could follow, because um, okay. Okay, so this one is, I think that the product names one under each of the headings, but they're okay, because I was just trying to highlight the different areas of security. I will anyway share the, yeah. I will share the PPTA, with all. Can you repeat attestation management? This one, I have a separate slide, but briefly I can explain you. So attestation and recertification. This is nothing but this is done as part of the compliance, regulatory compliance requirement. For example, like if in a SOX, there is a complaint called SOX, okay, Sarbanes-Oxley. So this requires any company which is storing personally identifiable information, they should do quarterly reviews of access within their enterprise. The access is nothing but like any company will have maybe a medium-sized company may have 1,000 applications, right, within the company for different purposes. So employees normally granted access to different applications on need basis. Okay, but what happens generally is the once the access is granted, the employees won't go back and they won't say that I don't need this access anymore. That access will continue to remain there. So what these regulatory requirement says is we should continuously recertify and attest the access rights of employees. So what happens is from the application you generate the report of who are all the users having the access, and that will be sent to the all the managers within the company. Okay, so managers anyway will have their team members. They would vouch or they would attest whether the access is still continue to be required or can be removed. Okay, so that is called attestation management. So there are products which are basically auto, it would connect to every application which is given there, and it would show it to the managers to recertify and attest. Okay, I can just discuss more if it is not very clear. So this is a periodic, periodically we should do, the company should do that and submit the reports, if they want to remain compliant to some of the regulatory standards. Okay, yeah. So okay, I think audio, I think there are some issues. Okay. Okay, I think cleared whatever we had till now. Okay, I'll go to the next slide. Okay, so here like we had showed you there are four pillars here, right? Identity governance, identity management, access management, and authentication. So we are going to look at each one of those pillars and see what these exactly means, actually, what I mentioned here. And I'm going to show that in the next slide. Like first we'll start with identity management. Okay, so this is the first identity life cycle which we spoke about. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a walkthrough of, whenever a new user joining a company, like new employee joining, so there is something called start of a user identity. Basically what happens is when somebody is joining, their ID will be created in the HR system, their human resource system. Okay, so this is what is called, actually here I've not done all the steps here. So initially I've not mentioned here. So the human resources, their ID will be created. Okay, and identity management system will take it from there, and it will create the user IDs and identities based on their role. For example, like, they may be, if they're joining a particular function like finance or HR, or the engineering, or support or admin, based on their group, there are certain group memberships will be provided. Okay, and so this is called provisioning. So there could be different ways to look at it. Like, it could be manually, you could create the identities in these different applications, or you can have an automated provisioning. Like the identity management system would create the identities based on the rules and policies. Okay, so I'm going to talk about provisioning in a separate slide anyway. So basically, once someone joins, their user ID will be provisioned within the enterprise, and then there will be a authentication setup will be done for him. Like, he may require a password, user ID password, or he may require a smart card for access. He may require the OTP registrations, or he may require a RSA, the secure ID registrations. All that will be registrations will be done through in the authentication process. So he will be continuously authenticating to different applications once this is done. Okay, and there will be authorization stages where, after authentication, the user may authorize, he may the system itself will authorize the user whether they have access to certain applications. Okay, so once the provisioning is done, then the authentication, authorization, then the in the part of the life cycle, they may do self service. For example, they may want to do password change, they may want to reset their password, or they may want to update their personal information. For example, their mobile number changes, or their address changes, they will update those things. That's all comes under self-service. Or they may want to ask for request for a new application, part of their role change or something. So that is called self-service. So user initiates these services. Okay, and there will be password management. Mainly, the managing their password, like, enforcing strong passwords, and syncing password between different applications. All that can happen, for that user. And there will be a governance. This is where I told you about, they may have to do attestation, recertifications, because time to time, just to recertify whatever they have the permissions, time to time ensure that, like, it is up to date. Okay, so that is comes under governance. And once the employee leaves the organization, then we have to deprovision. Deprovision is nothing but revoking their permissions, and then not only in HR system, so they revoke it, and they should be revoked everywhere, all the applications where he has access to. Okay, so this is just an identity life cycle in a normal scenario. Like, this is like anyone joins a company, this is what will happen to his identity over a period of time. Okay, so I'm just going to the next module. So this is again the identity life cycle, how this happens. Okay, so I've just taken one sample, like, Oracle. See, Oracle is one of the leading provider of identity and access management platform. So this is, I've taken Oracle Identity Manager as the example here. So as I told you, like, someone joins a company. So what Oracle Identity Manager does is, it actually has set of adapters like that. They are called JDBC adapter, Java based adapters, web service adapters, LDAP adapters, like that. So there are like, and these are all extensible. Like, if I have a new application which requires a custom adapter, then I could create a custom adapter. The job of this adapter is nothing but it should be able to manage the identities and access of an application. Like, these are the target applications. This could be my SAP, or this could be any of these applications, my payroll application, or there could be any application, right? So there could be, as I told you, in a medium enterprise, there will be minimum of 1000 applications, built over a period of time. So all these applications should have the connectors, so that the identity management system can actually manage those users and identities within those applications. I hope you are able to follow this. So how this works is, so when I implement identity and access management software within a company, so I onboard all the target applications, all the applications within the enterprise, so that all the users and access can be managed within the identity manager. So in identity manager itself, I would say that, okay, this guy's role is changed, or, he is promoted, or he moved between departments, or, he is terminated. So when I make those changes here, automatically through these adapters, all his records within these applications will be updated. And if someone is terminated, so just terminate him in the identity manager application. So he will be terminated in all the applications where he has access to. So this way, you are not allowing any orphan account to be present in the target applications. Okay, so without this, you understand, right? So without this identity management platform, there is a very, very high chance that, like, somebody leaves a company, you may not be able to go to every application and remove his access. So since we are centralizing all the identity and access, so in one go, you are able to now deprovision all the access of that user when we are terminating the user. Okay. So I will just check the comments, if anything. Okay, so that's okay. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to access provisioning. So this is again, as I told you, so the access will be granted to a user based on their birthright. Birthright is nothing but, like, if I'm a HR employee, then I should have access to HR systems anyway, right? So, and I'm joining the account receivables or account payables team, then I should have access to the payroll system. So those are all called birthright provisioning. And if I'm like joining as an administrator, then I may have to have I may have to have access to Active Directory. So these are all, called as birthright provisioning. Okay, so there is a hand raised. Yeah, I'm not able to see anything new. Okay, anyway, I think I will go back to questions, after each slide, so not in the middle of the slide. So, okay, so birthright is nothing but, based on their group or based on the role what they are coming in. So the identity management system will provision their birthright access, or it could be request based. Request based, I have shown here. Basically, the user initiates the request here. He could request, if he's a manager, he could request for others, or if he's a employee, he could request for himself through self-service portal. Okay, once the request is raised, then he can actually browse all the applications and roles, and only the applications and roles, to be visible for him, where he is allowed to access. Okay, so for example, a new employee, like, joining at level 1, may not have access to some of the applications which are required for level 4 or level 5. So it won't even show up in the request portal for him. Okay, and he will select the access and submit, and then the workflows kick in. Actually, these are all, could be automated workflows, or it could be a manual intervention may be required. For example, if it is for a very, very, privileged account, then there could be a approval process which may be required. where the justifications will be provided by submitting the request, and the based on the judgment, the approver will approve the request. When the request is approved, the access will be granted. But for example, if it is not a very very critical resource, then I can have an automated workflow. So workflow, what it would do is it would automatically create the user account in the target resource, and it would confirm that it is done. Okay, so this is the advantage of identity management system, right? So this is actually going to provide you automated provisioning, where user need not wait forever to for some administrator to create them identity in the target application. So this is also nowadays called as 0-day start. The 0-day start is nothing but whenever when a new joinee comes on board, so immediately the access will be granted to all the systems which is required for him to be productive from the day one, right? So they are all like done through identity and access management systems by automated provisioning. Okay, and there is a role based access provisioning, which is again, I told you, based on their role, what they are going to play within the company. And there will be rule based also. For example, if I have access to certain applications, then you can write a rule to give access to another application as well, instead of because they may be interrelated applications. So I can write a rule within the identity management system to create account based on the rules or based on roles, or users can access through a self-service request. It could be birthright provisioning. Okay, so I will just check the comments if any. Yeah, not able to see that, but anyway, I hope there are no chat comments. Okay. Okay. So next we are going to the centralized role management. What we mean by role management. So you can see, like the role-based access control. This is anyway very very standard term which is used since like maybe 30-40 years now. So this is basically grouping of permissions, and making them as roles. Okay. So roles can be the developer role, or it could be a HR manager role. It could be any of those. It could be based on the business function, or it could be based on their technical work. Like business function is nothing but like which I am giving the examples like HR manager. The technical roles will be like SAP admin, or they could be Active Directory admin. Those are all technical roles. So what role-based access control does is you define the permissions within a role, and when you assign a role, all the permissions will be granted through the role. So the roles you can see are the users, and there are roles and there are rights. And when someone access here, so these two diagrams are actually explaining how this works. So when the user like HR access, he would have a general role and HR role, and these roles will be mapped to certain applications. Like general role, always it is actually going to email, because anyone comes on board will have a general role, right? So they will get an email. And but HR also will have a specific role, which is basically a time card. Time card, nothing but time sheet of an employee, like whether they worked or not. So like that, like you group the permissions within the role. Okay, and when I assign a role, the permissions will be granted. Okay, so if you want a very fine grained access control, then you can also go for an attribute based access control. This is when you do not want to because the roles may have multiple permissions, so you can actually give an attribute level as well. Like for example, like if the value of because you identities will have attributes, right? Attribute is nothing but the phone numbers, or the any what you can call them, the fields within an identity, right? So based on like my phone number, my phone number starts with the ISD code 001, then I can actually say that okay, this guy is not in India, so we have to give a permission which is applicable to US. So that is called attribute based access control. Okay, so though he may have, as per role, he may get access to certain applications, but based on the attribute within his identity, attribute, as I told you, it is a field within his name. Like it would be a phone number, which would start from the ISD code. So based on that ISD code, you will assign certain applications for him. So that is called attribute based access control. Okay, so So similarly, I'm just going to workflow orchestration. So this is where, I mentioned about, you will have a workflow for any of the provisioning request, or, any life cycle events like joiners or movers or leavers of a company, or user self-service or recertification. Any of these times there will be a workflow, because the workflow is nothing but there will be a series of steps to be taken. The steps could be maybe, checking some rights, in some other application, or, maybe asking an approver to approve, review and approve the request, or anything like that. Okay. So I'm just going to show you here. So this is the identity management system. So there is a request process. The requester actually will submit through a request form, and it will go through a approval form where the approver will approve the request, and then there will be execution process. So this is the main thing here, where you will have the provisioning rules. So rules are nothing but, again, they would say that based on the role, or, based on the rule what we define within the identity management system, it will invoke the different provisioning connectors. The connectors, as I mentioned, it could be a, if I'm connecting to a database, Oracle database, then I will use a Oracle database connector. Okay. So those things are already defined in the identity management system. So based on the provisioning rules, it will invoke the provisioning connector, and it will create the, it will provision the identity in the asset. The asset could be database, asset could be LDAP, asset could be provisioning a mobile phone. It could be, giving a ordering a mobile phone to a user for a new employee. Anything can be an asset, right? So, but it will go through, you see, if it will go through this standard approval process, and based on the asset, I can actually alter the approval, the workflow process as well. See, for example, I told you about, ordering a phone. So in that, you may not require the provisioning connector there, or maybe, there could be a connector required to connect to Amazon and, order it. But basically, this entire process, you could tailor it, for the asset, what, you are requesting the access for. Okay. Or there could be some ticketing system you may have to use, because some of the applications may not allow you to create the users, automatically. So in that case, what happens is, the provisioning, the identity management system will create a ticket in the service now, or, there will be a remedy ticket, or, any ticket. Ticket is nothing but there will be a queue, where there will be a help desk person who will, attend that request and go to that asset and create the identity. Okay. So that's why it is called as provisioner. This is nothing but a help desk person or an administrator here. Okay. So this is how the workflow, a typical workflow works actually. So there will be a requester, he will request, and there will be approver, he will approve it, and then the identity management system will take over. If it is a automated provisioning, it will automatically create the identity. Or if it requires a ticketing system, it will involve ticketing system, and it will raise the ticket to create the asset, create the identity in the asset. Okay. So this is also one of the, features of the identity management system. Okay. So you may say, how this is going to secure my system, right? Secure my enterprise. See, having a very strong and very flexible workflow management system will ensure that, like, see, you see here approval process. So this is again, this comes under the security. Like, if you want to have multiple approvers, like 4i principle, or, if you want to do like that, you can attach multiple approvers to approve the request. And also, since there are no manual intervention while creating users in the application, so the manual errors likely to disappear, right? Likely to reduce, because there won't be manual errors while creating identities. One of the issue, if you see in the cyber security, right, in the whatever the hacking, and all these hackers who are getting access to enterprise, it is some issue is because of the manual errors within the enterprise, where, when they're granting access, they are not checking certain things. So that's the reason, the some of the hackers are, able to get access to the enterprise, right? So when you automate that entire access granting process, like, access provisioning process, then the chances of the malicious attack, or, chances of, manual error will go down, and similarly the posture of security would go up. Okay. So I'm just going to show a simple. So this may not be visible to everyone because there are like it is a small the image here. But what I'm trying to say is, yeah, there will be, see, any enterprise will have a directory, like like a telephone directory what you have. So every enterprise will have an Active Directory, or they could use any LDAP based directory. So where the users will be, all the employees and contractors and all the identities will be stored. Okay, I have given you an example of Active Directory here. So here basically how it works is, there will be a root. Okay, there will be a root node like this, and then you have these different nodes, like there will be a people node, there will be a role node, there will be applications node, there will be groups node. Okay, these are all very standard in the Active Directory. So whenever I create a user, so I create under people. Okay, when I'm creating a role, I can create it under the roles OU. These are all called, these are all called the organization units. So this is called an organization at the top. Then you have all these OUs. Okay, so I can create users. I can create. See, I can, even within people, I could create. The locate. See here, I could have many more like this. The second level nodes, where I could define the locations as well, like geography. What are the advantages of having a enterprise directories? Like you can have a different policies and different administrators attached to each of the nodes. So they will have, see, for example, if I have an administrator at this node, like he may not be able to administer or have visibility of this node. So you are actually going to do a segregation of duties. Like you are not allowing a administrator who are managing people to manage roles, right? So who are managing roles, you are not allowing him to manage applications. That way you are actually bringing in the segregation of duties also. So he can do only under whatever is the node he has, and under that all the tree structure he will be able to manage. So similarly, you have different. So this gives a very flexibility to manage the identities within an enterprise. So the identity and access management system generally connects to the enterprise directory, and this is where it is actually going to provision, and it will all the applications as well, they would connect to enterprise directory, and they would because you see here there are groups and all, right? So they would say whether the user has a group membership. If they have a group membership, then allow them to access, right? So you just have to understand that the directory services is a very essential part of identity and access management system, where where the entire, all the identities will be stored, and the identity management platform, the application, would actually connect to enterprise directory, and it will manage users and roles. Okay, so going to the next slide. So we are just talking about authentication. I'm sure you would have authenticated, whenever you use your user ID password, it will be authenticated, right? So this is a simple authentication. So anywhere you are trying to verify your identity, verify the identity, it is called as authentication. Okay, it could be user ID password or OTP or biometrics or smart cards or anything, but there will any one form of providing one form, maybe your date of birth, while your bank, somebody is calling you, they may ask you to identify yourself with your date of birth or something. So there could be any it could be it need not be application based authentication, it could be anything, even over phone, manually you could authenticate. But what basically, what authentication means is, you are able to verify the identity of an individual or an identity. Okay, so if it is verified, you grant the access. If it is not verified, you don't, you reject the access, deny the access. So the access management platform basically, does this authentication part. So you can configure any type of authentication, and it would actually connect to your enterprise directory, and it would authenticate. Okay, so similarly, I have a multi-factor authentication. So this is again, like I'm sure you would have heard, like there are three things one can identify themselves. One is something you have, right? You have a mobile phone, or you have a RSA token, or you may have a smart card, or you may have anything that is called as possession. Okay, and you also have something, like for example, your password is something, right? It could be the OTP, which is something, or maybe passphrase, something they are coming, they are categorized as knowledge. And being is nothing but your retina scan or your thumbprint, or any of those things, like which is basically your biometric data. Okay, that is called being. So to call something as multi-factor authentication, so two of these should be combined. Okay, so for example, like if I am accessing just my mail, I'm okay to just use my knowledge, like what my user ID password is good enough. Okay, but I'm going to connect as a super user to Active Directory. In that case, it may say that, okay, use your thumb impression, or it may say that you use OTP which is sent to your mobile. Okay, because he possesses mobile, so it is again multi-factor. So anything more than one factor is called as two-factor authentication, like it is multi-factor authentication. This is very important if at all user is having a privileged access, like he has an access where he can actually allow to delete data, or he can create data, or anything, any privileged access requires a multi-factor authentication. So here main thing you need to remember is I can't have passphrase and password as my multi-factor, or I cannot have my retina and my thumbprint as a multi-factor. I need to have at least two of these categories. Okay. So this is called multi-factor authentication. So this is all the access management systems, which comes under identity and access management. They would support these kind of multi-factor authentication mechanisms. Then you have adaptive authentication. So again, this is again a new technology. New means, I think, maybe about since 10 years, this is being used, mainly in the banking and wherever, whichever, wherever the financial or, the health related data is involved. So what it means is, like, there will be a risk analysis, done, for every authentication request. Okay. I'm trying to access my bank account, and I generally, withdraw 5,000 rupees, or transfer 5,000 rupees every transaction. Okay, so there will be risk profiling done by the access management system. So it says that, okay, now Lakshmi Narayan always, generally he will access, the ATM in Bangalore area, and he generally, the withdraws this much amount, and this all that it will be profiled actually. So when I suddenly, go to Singapore or US and try to withdraw money, then the risk analyzer suddenly will flag saying that, okay, there is a behavior change, or there is a pattern change in the behavior of this user. So it could ask for an additional authentication mechanism. Okay, so this is called adaptive authentication. So it could be anything. I just gave an example of the geolocation and the amount which I am withdrawing, but it could be anything, like I can suddenly, like between span of 2 minutes, if yet in if the withdrawal is happening in Bangalore itself, but it is between maybe 10-kilometer distance, so then there is a risk actually. So they would configure these rules within the adaptive authentication engine to ensure that, like these kind of things should flag as a risk. So you should look for multi-factor authentication in that case. So that is called adaptive authentication. Okay, so the definition here is there is a risk score for every request. Okay, if there is a general request or standard request, it will be same. But if there is a request which is abnormal, or which is like out of my normal behavior, then there will be the risk. There is a what you call, it will be notified, to raise a multi-factor authentication for him. Okay, so yeah, I hope this is clear. Then you are going to authorization. So this is again, like when you authenticate, you don't check whether, see, for example, when I am trying to authenticate to Gmail, you just check my password, whether whatever password I have given is correct or not. Okay, that is authentication. Authorization is after checking, then what other features can be provided by Google. For example, like if I am an individual user, like a free user in Gmail, it will just give me Gmail, the email access, and it gives me 2 GB free space. Okay, but if I am a business user and I access my Gmail, then along with the email access, I also would get maybe 30 GB G drive. and also I may get a Google Meets, and I also get Google Sheets or Google Forms. So these are the different additional rights which I would get after authentication. So that is called as authorization. Okay. See, if you hear there is an entity which is requesting for editor and admin access. Okay. So editor or admin. So he will log into the system. So he has only the editor privileges. So editor privileges will be granted to him, but he doesn't have admin privileges. So it will be, it will be denied or rejected. So authorization is nothing but giving him the group memberships or giving him the additional permissions he has once the authentication is done. Okay. So authorization could be based on explicit permissions like to the resource, or it could be a role. Because of the role I may get an access. Like for example, if I'm a company and accessing Dropbox, I may get a different access. And it could be based on the attribute. Like if I'm US, I may get a different a storage capacity. If I'm in India, I may get a different capacity. So that's what it's called, through attributes. So it could be anything. I can, but basically authorization is nothing but giving, returning all the privileges, after the authentication is done. Okay. We are going to single sign-on. So single sign-on is again like, I've given two examples here. Without single sign-on, what happens, and with single sign-on, what happens. Okay. So without single sign-on, you see, hello.
Okay.
Anybody is asking any questions? Okay. Okay. So without single sign-on, so you see here there are multiple applications, and for each application, the user is asked to log in. Okay, he will have to supply login and password, or you need to supply OTP or whatever the authentication is configured. He will have to log in through different means. But with the SSO, you can see that there will be once he will log in, and he would be able to access all the applications. Okay. So here if you see, what is SSO? SSO is a property of identity and access management that enables user to securely authenticate with multiple applications and websites by logging in only once. So how this happens is, the access management application what we have, that may connect to all these different applications, and it would use internally. There are different protocols like OAuth, SAML, there is a SAML 2.0, there is a Web Services Federation, there is a OAuth 2.0, OpenID. These are the different protocols which applications can communicate with each other. Okay. So if I trust, so if it is within an enterprise, so single sign-on is normally done within an enterprise. Okay. So within, in the sense, if I am from Net Analytics, so within Net Analytics, like the application, I will be allowed to access by logging in only once. Why I am stressing within enterprise here? Because this again depends on the trust. Okay, so the applications should trust each other actually. So you can't say that, okay, if one application is authenticated, the second application should trust. Okay, so that's the reason this is single sign-on is normally implemented within an enterprise. Okay, so what are the benefits here? The benefits are like user experience will be good, because he need not remember all the passwords, and then he can log in only once. And even the admin time is reduced, because there not he may not have to maintain passwords, and if he forgets password, then he may have to call help desk to reset the passwords and creating accounts. There are a lot of things which can be avoided if I have SSO within an enterprise. Okay, and these are can be implemented using these protocols which I mentioned here. So I will go into the next one, the federation, which I mentioned. So there are anybody has any questions? Because I think yes, okay, I'm not able to see the chart actually.
So Google's, hello, I'm audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Sir, when we log into Google Suite,
yeah,
we are logged into every services provided, but is it the same thing as single sign-on?
Yes,
Means
yes.
we are logged
Because
in
it is,
Google
yeah,
Suite
yeah, yeah. Because there are, yeah. because those are all G Suite is all part of Google. So they have only one authentication. Like they like when they authenticate you and authorize you, so they will give you access to all their applications. So all
So
the G
it
Suite
is the example of single sign-on.
yes, single sign-on within Gmail. Yeah.
G.
Yeah. So that is an example single sign-on exactly. Yeah. So I will just go to the federation one. So this is where in like so federation is nothing but like, for example, you are trying to access an application, okay, trying to log in, but you have already logged in. Yeah.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
So my question is Microsoft Passport is an example of SSO?
No, that is part of federation. So that's what it is, SSO itself, but it is called as federated SSO. Okay. See,
Okay,
Microsoft Passport also gives access to Dropbox, it gives access to Skype, it gives access to different applications, right? Which may not be only in Microsoft. Okay. See, I'll just explain this federation to you, then you will understand what I'm trying to say.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
So, yeah. Okay, I think they need to mute. I think somebody's talking. Okay, so yeah, so we are coming to federation. So federation is again part. It is same as single sign-on, but here the parties are different. Like you have you have two different domains. Like one application may be Facebook and one is Gmail. Okay.
Lakshmi sir, you can mute all from your side.
Oh, I have to mute everyone. Okay.
Everyone, you can do that once.
I'm trying to see where I can mute. Okay. I think I have it here. 1 second. I'll mute. No, it is mute only me actually. So Surendra has mute.
Anish Kumar sir.
1 second. I'm just trying to see how I can mute here. This doesn't say where I can mute. Okay. I think maybe Surendra can mute if you have access. Okay. So anyway, I will continue. See, I think Anish Kumar has actually muted. So when I talked about single sign-on like the Microsoft Passport or G Suite, they're all like again from the same enterprise, right? So they're all single sign-on, but again there is something called federated single sign-on. It means that there are two applications are from two different companies. Like for example, one is Facebook and one is Gmail. Okay, so in that case, how do you do it? So that is called as federated single sign-on. You may have seen this, when you logged into Facebook. That acts as an identity provider. There is a concept you need to understand here. So there is something called a identity provider and there is a service provider. Okay. So identity providers are nothing but they are actually trusted by the service providers. Okay. Now, when I am trying to register to any application, it may ask you if you've already logged into Facebook, shall I log in through Facebook or shall I log in through Gmail, right? So that is called as that is when this federated login is happening, federated single sign-on. So in that case, the relying party, for example, you are the new application which you are trying to access, it is actually saying that I trust Facebook or Gmail. So they would actually
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, when we log in Zoom through Gmail, that it is an example of federation single sign-on.
Zoom too? I didn't get you.
When we logged in Zoom via Google Gmail.
Correct. That is
okay,
then. Yeah. So in that case, you see the Zoom is now relying party and your Gmail is the identity provider. Okay. Identity provider is nothing but it is actually authentication provider actually. Okay. So you can call it that way. They are authentication providers and it could be either way. Like, Zoom also can be an authentication provider. Like you would have logged in to created Zoom account first. And then, when you go to Gmail can ask, can I log in through Zoom? I mean, do you want to log in through Zoom? Okay. So it is just basically, whichever companies have the trust between them, like they would use again the OAuth and, those protocols to establish the trust. Okay. So see here, there will be multi different domains here. So one domain, the initial authentication will happen, and you are trying to access. Then instead of you are authenticating again to the second application, it actually relies on the first party. It actually, take it from the Facebook or Gmail or anything. So I'm just giving the example of, the public identity providers which are available, which you also mentioned, like Passport or, the G Suite or Facebook. All of these are, public, they are all identity providers. Okay. So this is called federated single sign-on. The concept is same, but only the implementation wise, it would be different, because they may have to now start, having these different protocols to trust the other person's authentication. Okay. So I'm going to the next. Yeah, so just going to identity governance. So I mentioned initially that, the identity management, access management, and then also you have identity governance. See, this identity management and access management basically facilitates and also secures the access to the resources, and also seamlessly, manages the identities. Okay, but all that not enough actually. So you need to, because all these, every company need to have some regulatory, they have to follow some regulatory standards. Okay, so for that there is a different module called identity governance. So this is basically interconnected with identity and access management. So this will give a dashboard to the IT auditors, or assessing agencies, where they could come and see here what is the security posture. Like, they could see how many times the attestation is done this year, and how many applications at risk actually, because maybe some of the you employees may have left, but their access is still there in the application. Or, then they can do any kind of assessment, any kind of reports through the identity governance. This is like similar to like some of the standards, which you also follow, right? Some of the I can't remember. Yeah, I think you have some of the audit going on, right? Sometimes yearly you do audit. So similarly, if every enterprise need to have an audit for, how they're managing their users and access. So this comes under that. So the identity and access management systems actually, it stores, who has access, how it is used, and who should have access. So it actually keeps all the data. But identity governance module basically, gets the report in the form of what the SOX needs, or, what the HIPAA requires, or what ISO requires. It gives a better visibility of the access privileges within an enterprise. Okay, so this will be mainly given to the auditors and, the senior management of the company. So they would see what is the current status of the how user provisioning is being done. Everything, they would be able to see here, and who has access to what, and, and how long they have access, and, whether they really should have access. All those things will be given in the form of a dashboard. So this is also one of the very, very critical piece in the identity management system. Okay, basically this doesn't, this is not visible to the normal, users. This will mainly used by the senior management and the IT auditors. Okay. Again, I have just, added one more. There'll be multiple stages. One stage is like, in the identity governance, where you see all the reports, like all the certification, compliance reports and dashboards. And if there is anything lacking, the second stage will be policy enforcement. Like, you may have to maybe have a program which will create a segregation of duties, enforced within the enterprise. Or, there will be a redo, you have to redo the role definitions, anything if you have to do. Then based on the identity governance stage 1, the stage 2 will be decided. Okay, these are like actions taken once the visibility is given to the IT auditors. So based on the data what they see, they will take the policy enforcement decision. So that is the stage 2. These also again coming under identity governance, and the IDM modules, will be able to take care of this as well. Okay, so I have just given that attestation process. Initially you have asked, so I have a separate slide for that recertification. So see, every quarter or based on the frequency, of the regulatory, body which you are supposed to conform to, they will say 3 months or 6 months or when the review should be made. Okay. So in IDM, you can schedule a review, and the IDM will send an email notification to the managers or the application owners. Okay. And IDM will send reminder. So this may not be required. So this is like, if they don't do it, then the reminders will be sent, and managers will be approves or denies the user access. Okay. Under their department. And once they approves the request, nothing happens. IDM will continue. But if they denies request, then the application, the IDM will automatically revoke the access in the application. So that way, like, the entire every 3 months, you ensure that your system is clean. So there are no orphan accounts. There are no accounts which is having more access, and none of those things can happen, because you are centrally managing you are reviewing it every quarter, and also centrally managing the access as well, automated way. Okay. So this comes under identity governance again. This is called access certifications. Like, this will be done every quarter. Okay. So there is one more module which I just want to, because this is again, we were talking about identity management in general till now, but there is a specialized area within identity management. It is called privileged identity and access management. Okay. So this is the difference with the identity access management with IAM, with the PIM or PAM, is nothing but, here all the credentials will be kept in a password vault. So this is very, very secure. Like, they could so, and also, I have just given some of the basic principles in this. So all the users may not have access in the privileged identity management system. This is only for the users who have root access or super user access or administration access. Okay. So their identities and their passwords will be kept within the vault. Okay. And these are some of the basic principles of privileged access. So I'll just read this out. So first thing is, user accounts are not, basically the users within this PIM system, they are not assigned any privileges. Okay. That will be assigned only when they require, like just in time. So you see here, just in time administration, just enough administration. So they may not be given root access for the entire server. They may be given root access only to a given folder. Okay. Write access. So something like that. So this is all the super user and all the privileged accounts will be managed through this. Again, this is connected to IDM anyway, because this is considered as one of the application within the enterprise. Okay. So IDM will again track who has privileged access and everything. But anybody trying to access the Linux server as a super user, then they may have to go through the privileged identity management software. So this is like a proxy kind of thing where they would use to log into any privileged systems which requires privileged access. Okay. So there are no permanent membership to any of the groups, and the administrators should have only permissions that they need to achieve the task at hand. So this is very, very restrictive actually. So I have given some more here. So implementation of secure administrative host, provide time bound access. Like, if access is given, it may say that, okay, for next 5 minutes, this guy will have access. Then the access will be removed automatically. Okay. This is not permanent. So in identity and access management system, once you give the group membership, generally it will continue till the recertification happens. Okay. But in this case, just to do that task, the access will be granted. Okay. And it enforces always multi-factor authentication, because these are all privileged accounts. So always they have to authenticate through two-factor at least. Okay. And here requires approval and justification to activate privileged access. And it actually does a lot of logging in this case, because anything they do as a privileged user are very, very critical, right? So there will be many more levels of audit logging will happen. Okay. So you see here, there's a simple request happen. So any users requesting for access, it will go through approval rules, and it will go through a session proxy, where the password will be retrieved, and then they'll be given access to the applications. And you can see here, there will be a lot of emphasis on the record and audit here. The sessions will be recorded, and there should be possible to replay the sessions. The audit logs will be there, the archive logs will be there. So all these archiving, the duration also would be very long, like, you know, because that is because they will be doing sensitive activities. Okay. So I think that's okay. So I'm just giving some more, you know, things. What are the maturity curve? See, we spoke about so many different modules, right? So you cannot, like, you know, any enterprise, they cannot get to top class identity and access management in the first phase. So there is something called a maturity curve. Okay, for there are, like, in the left side, left column, you can see there is a audit, provisioning, authorization, user management. These are the different modules within IDAM. And then you have these columns here, like immature, starting up, active, proactive, top class. These are the different maturity levels of identity and access management system within a company. So if it is like, you know, somebody says I am, like, you know, CMM level 5, or, you know, Six Sigma company, then they may have to get into maybe, you know, proactive or top class in all these areas. So here, you know, we have mentioned what exactly they will be doing in each of the areas. Like initially it will start from immature, like, you know, there will be silos, and there will not be, you know, delegated administrations, and there will not be any password policies and all that. There will not be any multi-factor authentication. They're all in the immature stage. Then slowly they will start investing on IDAM, and they have to get to the maturity level. The top class is when they get into that is when they have these multi-factor authentications, and they will have the adaptive authentications, and, you know, they will have privileged identity management solutions. They will have role-based access controls, and they will have the proper, you know, the identity governance system in place. Then they'll get into the top class, the maturity. Okay, so you can, anyway, I'll be sharing this, so you can go over this to understand, you know, how the maturity curve can evolve. This is one of the example maturity curve. Okay. Just going to give some of the benefits of identity and access management. So we are dividing them into 4 different categories. Okay. So one is information consolidator. So as you see, we are consolidating all the users and their access at one place, right? So in that way, so it is easy for you to get a comprehensive picture of entire organization data through identity and access management system. Okay. And even if you want to implement a new application, it is very easy to implement, because all the role-based access control, their authentication, authorization, everything is now already available within identity and access management. They just have to integrate with the central identity and access management system. Okay, and you can manage the resources very easily, because you just, you know, say that, okay, this user is joining HR, so automatically all the access and all the identities will be created, and access will be granted automatically. Okay, so increasing control, and, you know, you have all the, you know, eliminating redundancy in data management, right? So you don't have to manage the data at multiple places, so only at central place you manage the data. So this is basically a soft dollar savings for a company. Then you have all these authentication authorization, so you have, you know, the HIPAA compliance, and, you know, you are you know, getting, you know, get a better reputation within the industry, like, you know, because there will not be any data breaches happening, and, you know, you will have, you know, better brand, you know, you can build within the globally. Okay, and you can securing the corporate data, and, you know, you are basically, you know, confirming to all the audits. I mean, access your profile name, and, you know, your some of the basic details from your profile. So if the user gives a consent, then only it will give access. But unfortunately, what happens is, once you do it right, next time it won't ask. So by mistake, if you say yes once, then always, like, you know, your Facebook will be integrated with your another application. So I think we should be very careful. Once we give consent, then they will consider it as, you know, they will not ask again and again. So we should be careful when we use the third party authentication, like, you know, like this Facebook or any of these. Yeah, but in the normal
So
scenario,
is there any way we can stop in between, like if I have logged into a game by using Google account, and sooner or later I realize that I'm not going to play with it for a long time? So is there any way how I can detach my information from that particular game or itself?
You can actually, you have to clear all your cookies, and, you know, you have to do that, and, you know, that's what you can always do that. If you clear cookies, it actually goes off. So then again, it will ask you, to accept.
Clearing the cookies will delete the data from my particular system, but what
No,
about
no,
the
it won't
cloud?
delete. See, no, it won't actually. It won't delete. So if at all, you are given consent and the second application has got the data, then you can't do much other than writing to them, or, even we get those spam mails, right? They may say that, okay, unsubscribe from me. But unfortunately, they will not send you emails, but still they will have your data. So that's what will happen. So I think,
Okay,
once we
okay.
give
It is the
consent, that
first
is as
time.
good as gone. Yeah. Yeah. First time only they would collect the data. And we will never, they will never tell us when they are going to delete the data. They would say that, yeah, you are unsubscribed. That's all they would say.
Because I've
So,
gone through the IT Act 2000, but everything is given.
yeah.
This point is very important, but I don't think that it has been given much importance to it.
Yeah, no, I think, coming days, I think all these are going to be very important because everything is in cloud and people data is going everywhere. And we will never know who stores your data and how, what kind of data they have. And nowadays, like, you see, a lot of these shopping, the e-commerce company keeping a lot of our browsing behavior and all sort of data. And it is a big compromise from our end, actually. So we allow them to, install these browser plugins and all that. We should never install browser plugins, which will actually monitor what we are doing. Basically, they would tie up with these e-commerce and, all these shopping sites, and they would try to, share the data. So I think, it's the end of the day, our consent. So we should be very careful not to accept any the ActiveX controls, when the browser accesses something, we should not allow that to execute anything locally in our system. And also we should not allow them to install their plugins and all that, in our browser. And I think as much as possible we should not do the federation, from the social media sites,
Lot
because
of
they
concepts
may
are
say
clear,
that,
sir. Thank
okay,
you.
yeah. So we can always, deep dive into each one of those, but I think, it's time now. We
Okay,
have
sir.
few minutes. Yeah.
Sir, how access
Yeah.
management works in cloud?
So in cloud, that's the reason, like, see, when it is in cloud, again, like, see, your Gmail also in cloud, right? So you send your username and password, and it will authenticate, and, it will give you access. See, there is not much difference, other than, they use a different protocol. See, if it is a internal, there is a different protocol, and if it is a external authentication, they may use a SAML protocol. Okay, SAML is again, security assertion markup language. Okay, so using that, they will be able to pass the authentication and authorization information across the internet. Okay, so it is just a different protocol. So other than that, there are no real difference between, access management in cloud.
Okay, so maybe
Yeah.
I thought maybe for different services it is different. Maybe for IaaS it is different. For SaaS PaaS it is different.
No. They don't have to actually. They all will follow the same model. Like, see, authentication is authentication, right? Just verifying identity. It could be again, based on your single, username and password, or it could be based on multi-factor. So that's all they could do. They can't do more than that.
Actually,
Or
like
at most they
in
can
IaaS,
encrypt. Yeah. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
IaaS when we purchase some instance, it is usually single
Uh-huh.
username and password that is given.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we like whichever people, whoever is accessing that particular instance, if I want them
Uh-huh.
to access only some part of it, so is there any way? Uh,
Yeah, you can. So you are talking about AWS or AWS,
AWS,
right?
yes, AWS.
Yeah, you can see what inside AWS. If you see, you can create a
Mhm.
server, right? Like that, you
Yeah.
can create a user also within IAM. You can call, there is something called IAM user in AWS. If you see, okay, so you create that user and give him only access to install app, or, you give him read only access, or, you can do all that. You can create a
Okay. Okay.
you can create a home directory for him within that instance. So when he logs in,
Mm-hmm.
he will have access to only his home directory. He will not have access to the whole root file system. So
Okay.
that is the IAM user you have to create within AWS. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and there are set of permissions you can give to that IAM user. So same thing
Okay.
works for all other cloud providers. If I buy from Microsoft Azure, they also have an identity and access management system in place. So similarly,
Okay.
AWS has it, and GCP, Google Cloud has it. So all of them has a proper, mature identity and access management system. So you can assign groups and you can access that group within your server, what you create there. All that possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know theory, today, I hope, you didn't mind, because no, giving a demo in this is a bit of a problem, because, there are so many products involved in this, right? I wanted to give a just to, overall how, all the components, and just give you an overview of that entire system. Okay. Okay. So Surendra, so if not done, then can we end the session, or? Okay, there are some questions here. Sorry, I did not see.
Sir, you can explore me about the security challenges in Internet of Vehicle, because it's my PhD topic. So
Okay,
you
so
can tell me about
you mean
Internet of Vehicle.
yeah. So you mean about the connected vehicles, or is that?
Sir, these work on the internet, sir. Internet of Vehicle. These are not connected. Means are moving vehicle. Move through the internet, through the base station.
Okay, see, I have some idea about this connected vehicles, and the auto, the what is that? Mainly the IoT in vehicles, okay, in cars. Okay, so what happens is, in see, nowadays, like, all these automobiles will have more and more software in it, right? So they will have their the controls, like for each of the ECUs and all that, what they have internally, they will have some software which says the health of that ECU, right? Health
Yes,
of
sir.
that
Yes.
module. Yeah. So what happens is, like, as we start connecting these data to internet, okay, so you are actually exposing lot of your controls, which are in the car, to the internet, like for the hackers. Now, if hackers can connect to your, the infotainment system, for example, in your car, because nowadays, like, even these BMWs, Audi, they all come with, connected car concept, where if there are multiple, cars, with the from the same the same model, so they would connect each other, if at all, in the brake, in case of, what you call them, breakdown, so that may help. But in other cases, like, because there is a connection allowed, from the internet to the car, so the hackers also will definitely try to get into your infotainment, and then slowly into your OBD, and try to get the diagnostic data, and try to control the car, right? Maybe try to induce a false, the fault in your car. So all that possible. So I think, it is very, very important, like, when we expose any interface, from the car, especially if, to the internet, we should be very, very careful. So that's the reason, like, if you see the infotainment modules in the car, they will be not a direct Android, though there is Android OS, but they are again customized Android. Like, for every car brand will have their own brand of their own version of Android, where they won't allow any application to get installed in that system. They will have their own softwares running, right? They can't allow anybody, to install, though it is Android, they won't allow any application to run there. So still, like, see, since that is again, related to the risk, right? Functional safety of the individual. So connecting to internet is definitely, it's a long way to go. Though the technologies are evolving, it is possible to connect now and do all those, the um, controls, from the internet. You can change the, switch on the AC sitting at home and all that, but they're all risky, actually. Like, you are exposing your Wi-Fi interface to hackers, who can actually, scan that area and find the MAC address of your Wi-Fi device, and they could connect, and they could operate. So you are exposing more and more risks, actually, by enabling the connected cars, by enabling the internet in the car. I mean, that is just my viewpoint, so you could explore more from there.
So any tools for implementation?
Yeah.
Any tool for implementation of this type of things?
See, again, Internet of Vehicles is again a vast subject, right? So there are definitely, I know some softwares which are basically, for IoT, for infotainment and, for connected cars and all that. I've seen some security softwares, mainly originating from Germany and Sweden. I've seen some softwares actually. You could just try some connected car software, security softwares. What they do is they will harden. There is something called hardening the OS, right? Which we do even otherwise. So what they do is even in the car, though there is a connected to internet, but they will harden that OS. Okay, harden means they won't expose any port other than maybe they would customize some port where the communication can happen to the internet. But they would not expose the HTTP or HTTPS, those kind of port where hackers are normally, try to target.
What sort of implementation is possible, or may I change my topic?
See, that is not something which I can comment, because it definitely, from the PhD point of view, I think it is a topic which you could explore, because that is going to be the future, right? Slowly, we need to connect all these to the internet, and so that the it will help, in the breakdowns, and lot more value-added services can be provided, right? So I think you should continue to do that if you ask me, but I think it is your personal choice anyway. So.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah. But I think it's a good area to explore.
But if implementation is not possible, then it may took long time. So I am asking, any software is there? So
No. There are no one software. Even there, it is like all these challenges are there, and still it is unresolved. And that's the reason you don't see all these internet, accessible from the car. So they are like very restrictive. So if you want, you can see. Again, you can get into a what is that? I think, I don't know what you call subdomain there. Instead of saying connect everything to internet, maybe you just take a subdomain in there. Only for breakdown, I would have connect my car with the nearby the garages or whatever it is, like those kind of. I think maybe some domain you can take up and do it maybe. I don't know. It is out of my syllabus.
okay. Thank you,
Sorry.
sir.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Oh, keylogger. Okay. Yeah, if you install keylogger, definitely, I think Prashant Kumar asked. So this is definitely a security risk, to the highest level. But if there is a double authentication is there, then they cannot. Because see, if you see the double authentication, like multi-factor authentication I mentioned, there are three things, right? One is my knowledge, one is my biometric, and one is my device. So you can't enter, two, both in through keys, right? Only password you can enter. So that way, if you see, if any sensitive system where they have multi-factor authentication enabled, then keylogger may not be able to detect that. Okay, but enabling keylogger definitely is a security risk. That is like, yeah. Okay. Okay, I think I covered all the other questions. Yeah, this digital signature, I think Usha Jain asked, it is actually not part of identity management. Actually, it comes under digital rights management. Okay, which I showed you in that. But still, the implementation, what they can do is, instead of, they can always store digital signature part of an identity, then it becomes part of identity management. So yeah. Like for example, like for a user, you can have like phone number, email, like that. You have the fields, right? You can also have a digital certificate stored along with that. Then it becomes a identity and access management problem to manage that. Okay. Okay, so what is the difference between, Paramita asked, what is the difference between identity management and digital forensics? So these two are different. See, digital forensics comes under, the logging part, like, you, you log and archive, right? So that's where the digital forensics comes. That is basically, it is used for investigation. So that's the reason, like, when I spoke about privileged identity and access management, I said, more of session recording, and when privileged user is doing something, then do the session recording, and then log whatever they are doing, and set up the archive policies. All that are required for digital forensics. So that is basically trying to investigate based on the digital evidence what you have. Okay, so that is a different area altogether. It comes under it is a separate domain altogether. But the input will be from the identity and access management and identity governance and the privileged identity and access management systems. That's where the audit logging will happen, and then digital forensics will take further from there, because then they have to correlate all the the log events and see who has done what and all that. So there's a lot more in that. That security analytics and all other domain come into picture there. Okay, so anything else? So otherwise we can end the session. So Surendra, is it done or?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So shall I drop off?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lakshmi Narayana,
Yeah.
for giving a wonderful session.
Thank you.
And I got the feedback from many of the participants.
Okay.
They are happy with all the content and the presentations, whatever you are given.
Okay.
Thank you. In future also, we expect your support as and when required. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you everyone for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.